Hi, YouTube. Today I want to talk a bit about the politics of being disabled on the internet. Now, this is something I've thought about since I've been on the internet, since like my early Facebook days in middle school, and just how being disabled, but not in the way that non-disabled society wants you to be, that gets you some hate. And not only that, but sometimes it can be very lonely because you see other disabled people who kind of bow down to non-disabled expectations, and they will post things that they know non-disabled people will find funny or cute, and a lot of times they'll get all this attention and all the followers and the likes. And early on in my choice to be a YouTuber and to post more on Instagram, I decided that I was going to not bow down to able-bodied society, even if that meant I would have less followers and less likes and less engagement and all that. Because ultimately, you have to be real to who you are. And if you're pretending to be somebody, if you are pretending to be somebody that you aren't, then at some point you're gonna slip up. At some point the mask is gonna come off and you're gonna be who you really are. And also, it's just, I never understand people that pretend to be something they aren't. But I wanted to talk about this because I see a lot of, especially on TikTok, I've seen a lot of disabled people, especially people who have recently acquired their disability. And now I do want to be very careful here because I do realize that if you've acquired your disability, it is a major life adjustment. I'm not going to discount that. I'm not going to dismiss it. But I've noticed a lot of people who've acquired their disabilities will post stuff that can be interpreted as inspiration porn, as look, I overcame this. The doctor told me I would never walk again, but here's a video of me walking. Or the doctor told me I would never speak again, but here I'm starting to speak. There's no issue with being proud of your accomplishments, but the issue is, in this case, is that there are people who, and this is something I'm going to give credit where credit is due. One of my friends from Kathleen Downs, she wrote a blog post. It's probably like a decade ago now. It's been a while, but this blog post has always stuck with me, and it made me think about my disability differently and how I view my disability and the way that my body functions differently. And what Kathleen said was, what if you didn't prove the doctors wrong? We always talk about the people who proved the doctors wrong and beat the odds. But what if your doctor said you'll never walk again, and you never do walk again? Does that mean you're a failure? Does that mean you didn't try hard enough, or you're giving up? No. Everybody's body is different. Everybody's circumstance is different. A lot of your abilities come down to luck, come down to if it's an injury, where the injury occurred, how severe the injury is, but also what access you have to care and therapy and resources. If you don't have access to physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy, you probably will not have the same capabilities as somebody who does have that. And that's not a mark against you. We live in a society where some people have less resources than other people. And that is something we need to keep in mind, especially as disabled people, if we have privilege, whether it be white privilege, whether it be economic privilege, whatever the case may be, is just because you can do something and you view it as I worked hard, doesn't mean you can share that without putting people down. And I think a lot of people haven't figured out how to do that. And I'm not pretending I know the way of doing that. But one thing I do when I post pictures of me like running or doing anything athletic, I try not to make it about, I look at me being able to do this, I'm so proud of myself. Instead, I'll just post a picture like that and be like, I had a nice time today, or I love running, it's one of my favorite things to do. But I won't make it about, this is something I worked so hard to do, because I realize there are people that can work just as hard as me and not be in the same place I am, and that's okay. And also there are people that can work just as hard as me and may be able to do things that I cannot. If I look like a mess, it's because I just used my bike and my race runner, so and it's kind of hot out, so I'm sweating a bit. But there are some things I didn't add originally in the video that I think need to be said, so here I go. So one of the first things I would really like to emphasize is I don't want anybody to feel ashamed of this. We're all ableist, even me, because we live in a society where ableism is so pervasive that we cannot help but absorb and internalize some of that ableism. But with that being said, is we all need to work on unlearning ableism, and is especially not perpetuating it, because by perpetuating it, we're just continuing the cycle of harm. Another thing I wanted to say is I think a lot of this mindset of like, I proved the doctors wrong comes from the rehabilitation, the rehabilitative model of disability. And what that is the idea that we can overcome our disabilities through intense rehab and therapies. When I was a kid, I was always taught to push past my limits, because then I would reach my full potential. But what is my full potential? Why is somebody who can walk inherently better than somebody in a wheelchair? And the answer to that is they're not. But our society views walking as like the way to get around But that doesn't mean that people who cannot walk, or even if they can, but they choose not to because walking may cause pain or may make them very tired, that does not make them bad people. And that is what I want the main message to be, is when we put disabled people on a pedestal and be like, oh, this is the way to be disabled. This disabled person is inspiring and oh, they're so funny. Then we're reinforcing the impairment hierarchy, which is the belief that certain types of disabilities and certain extents of disabilities are better than others. Another thing I really wanted to add is I've noticed a lot of people, especially with acquired disabilities, but of course this happens with any disability really, is a lot of people will say they have a dark sense of humor to cope with their disability. I have a dark sense of humor, and I don't want to be like, oh, I'm better than these people. But these people's idea of a dark sense of humor are like, oh, here's a tip on how to stop doing this. Become paralyzed. That's not even fun. The only reason you think that's funny is because you think disability is inherently funny, because you were born non-disabled, and so you've always looked down upon disabled people. So now that you're disabled, you're still making fun of disability because you think disability is inherently funny. And if I seem to be getting heated at this point in the video, I am. This pisses me off that these people, a lot of times we validate these people and we enable them to make these jokes that and the thing is here is it's not even offensive. I'm not offended by it. It's just not funny. I don't know anybody who actually laughs at that. And if you do, well, sorry, but these people, I shouldn't say these people, but there are people that believe that being disabled makes you special, and in and of itself is an accomplishment. And it's not like being disabled and going to the grocery store. You're going to the grocery store. Being disabled and writing a book, you're writing a book. Being disabled isn't in and of itself a badge. I mean, I will say disabled people are marginalized by an ableist society. I will always say that, but I think a lot of people forget that disability is not an individual issue. It is a societal issue. And I think a lot of disabled people, and I'm even speaking for myself, especially when I was younger, we feel weird when we're around other disabled people sometimes, because that reminds us, oh, I'm not special, I'm not different, I'm just another disabled person. And I think, okay, I found this on the web. Wow, stop. Sorry, that was an AI. But I find it very healing and very comforting to be around a lot of disabled people. When I was younger, it would make me feel uncomfortable, especially being around people with CP, because it would almost be like looking in a mirror, and everything I was insecure about, I would see in other people. But now it's like that quote from the late Stacey Milburn. I don't know it word for word, but it goes something like, loving disabled people has helped me love myself. realizing that disabled people are people and we're just as beautiful and just as flawed and messed up as anybody else has allowed me to love myself. And not even love myself. I don't know if I'm at the point where I could say I love myself, but it has helped me accept certain things about myself and make peace with things that I've hated about myself. And I'm getting a little emotional here. I don't know why. I think because I've just been going through a really hard time with internalized ableism and my mental health, and so this is getting me a little emotional here. There's no shame in that, Erica. But anyway, I think a lot of disabled people exist in a vacuum, or they think they exist in a vacuum, because nobody can actually exist in a vacuum. And so they think social media is a way to show themselves to the world while not also associating with other disabled people. But if you're not associating with other disabled people, how can you wear the label of disabled? Because disability is a social, it's a social phenomenon. It's not an individual experience, even though we all have our own individual experiences as disabled people. I know this is a very convoluted mess, but such is life. Life is a very convoluted mess. And so is disability, because disability is part of life. Wow, I got philosophical. Not deep, but I got philosophical. I won't say I'm deep because I'm not, but yeah. Sorry, I needed some water because, again, I was on my race runner and my bike, but I think for a long time I pushed my body beyond its limits because I thought that would make me worthy. I thought I would get some prize, or I would feel okay about myself. But at the end of the day, I was just tired and in pain and not taking care of myself and not listening to my body. I was pushing myself past my limits because I thought that was what I had to do. And I don't want people to think they have to do that. I don't want the next generation to feel like in order to be a good disabled person, they need to push themselves past their limits. You need to run X amount of miles. You need to do this. You need to do this at least once a day. If you don't work out and you're disabled, you're just lazy. Like all of that toxic mindset really contributed to my low self-esteem and my ED. And that is something I really want to challenge for the next generation, because I know a lot of people are like, well, back in my day, we had to deal with that. But that is not something I want to be like. I want the next generation to have better than I did. Because there were times when it was really shitty. There were times when I felt terribly about myself, and I treated myself terribly as a result, and I allowed other people to not treat me well because I thought that I must deserve to be treated badly because I'm not good enough. I don't want other people to go through that, and I really don't think anybody else should either. I think then you're being sadistic and you're just continuing a nasty cycle. Yeah. Again, if you want to post disability puns or jokes, or you want to be inspiring, that's okay. I made a face when I said that's okay, because internally I'm like, that's not okay, please don't do that. But you're allowed to do what you want to do. That's your prerogative. I think it contributes to a very ableist culture. Even if you're disabled, you can contribute to ableism. I've talked about how I have contributed to ableism in the past. I have tried my best to unlearn ableism, and it is an ongoing process. It's not something there's an endpoint. Oh, I'm absolved of all my ableism now. I'm ready to go out into the world and teach. No, I make these videos as somebody who is still learning every single day. I'm not better than you. I don't think I'm better than you. I know there are people that will comment, oh, you think you're better than people. I genuinely do not think that, but if you want to believe that, you're entitled to your own beliefs. But I'm making this video because, again, this is not an individual issue. There's a reason I didn't name names in this video, is because I'm not here to call out people or shame them or cancel them. If you know me, you know I don't believe cancel culture is a real thing. I've made videos about this. I don't think I have to go into it again, but if you would like to, you can watch those videos. Hopefully I'll remember to put it in the cards. But my point is you're not a bad person if you do these things, but it is more to bring it to people's attention that you may not be doing these things knowing they cause harm, but the underlying message is rooted in ableism. So yeah, that's about all I had to say for this portion. Stay tuned for the other one. Another thing I have to add is this also reminds me of a post on Instagram by an eating disorder advocate who goes by the friend I never wanted. I will put it up on the screen, but it is basically this post was about fat phobia, but it talked about marginalized people in general and how it is natural for some people to want to be the token marginalized, the good one of the marginalized people, because you want to shield yourself from the harm of that marginalization as much as you possibly can. So sometimes disabled people will try to be the good disabled person who doesn't talk badly about ableism or inaccessibility, and they won't stand up for themselves, and they'll work hard to inspire able-bodied people, and they don't see an issue with being an inspiration, even though it's like, well, what is so inspiring about existing in a disabled body? I don't know, but my point is there's always, it is natural to want to shield yourself from harm, but in shielding yourself from that harm, you are just passing that harm on to other people, and that's not okay. And now here I want to go into a bit of a personal anecdote. So if you don't know this about me, I have a disability called spastic diplegic cerebral palsy, and basically it just means I have very tight muscles. Yeah. And my CP on the surface seems like it's pretty mild. But the thing is I don't have full use of either of my arms. I pretty much have almost full use of my right arm, but as you can see, I cannot, I can't put all my fingers up individually. And I know it's like, that's not a big deal, Erica. But the thing is I can't dress myself. I cannot shower myself. I rely on other people to help me with daily tasks. And once upon a time, when I went to occupational therapy and speech therapy and physical therapy, I would try and try and try to be able to put on my socks, to take off my socks, to put on underwear, to take it off, to put on pants, to take them off, to do all of that personal care that I cannot do. And then there's a part of me that always thinks, maybe if I just stuck with it, I could do it. But here is the caveat with that. If I did all those personal care tasks by myself, I would be trading in things that are more important to me. And what I mean by that is I would probably have to wake up very early to do it. It would take me hours. Not just 1 hour, not just 2 hours. I'm talking hours. Like it probably, if I tried, it would probably take me about 5 hours to be able to get ready by myself. And then by the end of that, not only would it take a really long amount of time, it would zap all of my energy. I don't have an endless supply of energy. There are studies that say that a lot of people with CP, we use up more energy just living our daily lives than the average person, because our muscles are either tight or they're loose, and it takes a lot of energy for our body to just exist. And so if I were to do all those things by myself, I would not be able to have a social life. I may not be able to work. I may not be able to go to school. I may not be able to write or do YouTube and do all of the things I want to do. Well, when you're disabled, and I'm not speaking for every disabled person here, because of course I cannot do that, but from my experience, you have to make trade-offs. You have to say, what do I want more? Do I want to be able to do all of this by myself, to shower and dress by myself, to do all these personal care tasks by myself, or do I want to be able to live my life? And early on, I made that trade-off. I think it was actually high school when I really started to say to myself, I may never be able to be fully independent. And I put independence in air quotes because I don't believe any of us can ever truly be independent. But that was before I understood all of those lofty concepts. But I made that choice when an assistant principal told me my aide was no longer allowed to open my locker for me, and I had to do it for myself. And this was at a time when I was obsessed with not only being intelligent, but seeming intelligent to other people. So I took like 4 AP classes in 1 year, and if I were to go to my locker and open it and get all my stuff out by myself, I would have to leave my classes 10 minutes early and arrive at my classes 10 minutes late. And if you know anything about AP classes, is they try to shove as much work and as much class time in as little time as they possibly can. So every minute you're learning something or doing something. And at that point, academia was one of the most important things in my life. And it is something I have since my relationship with academia has changed, and that's no longer my life. Of course, it's still something I'm passionate about, but if if my if I don't become an academic, it's not the end of the world. My identity is not wrapped up in one specific thing. And so that brings me back to the whole concept of the politics of disability online. Is I think a lot of the big disabled influencers, and I'm not gonna call anybody out because I don't want this video to be about me versus them. I don't want that to be the case, but I want this to be more of a conversation starter. But I think that a lot of the big disabled influencers, a lot of them, their identity is wrapped up in one specific thing, whether it's being seen as being inspirational or being normal while being disabled, or look at me still living my life despite a disability. I think a lot of us as disabled people, we struggle to find an identity, and we want to be something. When I've learned in life is sometimes you just have to be yourself and not worry about curating this image of yourself. Sometimes you just have to exist and not worry about the rest. Sometimes, actually most of the time, I'm not inspiring. I'm not this person who's accomplishing these great things. I'm just me, and I'm disabled, but I'm not this extraordinary person, and that's okay. I've made peace with who I am, and how most of the time that's pretty mundane and it's pretty boring. But that's okay. As a disabled person, I don't have to prove that I deserve to exist. And with that is the end of this video. I don't know if it was any good. I don't know if it helped anybody or if it resonated with anybody, but if it did, please give it a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate that because that helps with the algorithm, or as some people like to write in my comments, the algorithm. I do love when people write that in the comments, and it always makes me laugh. I'm a huge dork about puns and stuff, but that makes me laugh. But anyway, and if you would like to see more of my content, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Again, thank you for watching. I really appreciate that some people take the time to listen to my rants. So thank you, and bye.